JBS presents exclusive television coverage of the 2016 Jerusalem Post Conference from the Marriot Marquis Hotel in New York City.
To say that in this arena, the war against terrorism and the war in general in the Middle East, it's the sushi war, as I call it, Sunni and Shia war. It's not related to us. It's not related to Israel. It comes back to the 7th century with the weapon of the 21st century. And the same process that we saw in Gaza Strip, where we have now Islamic Emirate, we'll see in other territories if we withdraw without any security measures. And we could see it also at the Golan Heights. So I think that we need to understand those people, that we're not speaking about lone wolf. This is something that we need to erase from the terminology. We're speaking about a group of people, and actually very, very divided, that we must admit that the first victims are Muslims themselves, and everybody is doing takfir like ISIS or Jabhat al-Nusra, which means they are speaking about other Muslims as the epicures or not the real Muslim. And to recognize the enemy, to stop with this PC, and it's not private computer or something like that, and to tell the truth. To tell the truth. What I see, what I watch, what I touch, this is what it is. This is the reality. Don't try to put it in a nice way and miss the way that you can identify your enemy. You cannot identify your enemy, you are going to lose the battle.
Efraim Halevy, former head of the Mossad. Would you agree, I mean, you in the past have taken possibly a different approach when it came particularly to Hamas in the Gaza Strip. You've openly called for Israel to engage Hamas in talks. What's your position today when you look at what's happening?
First of all, I'd like to say that I do not believe there is an existential threat to the state of Israel. I believe Israel is indestructible. I believe Israel is the strongest force in the Middle East, and there is no threat whatever, whether it's from Iran, with all the equipment they have and they wish to produce, whether it's from Hamas, which is on our southern border, whether it's Hezbollah on the north. There is no existential threat to the state of Israel. That's number one. Number two, I want to say there is an existential threat to the state of Israel. And it was mentioned this morning in an hour of discussion on many other issues. And former Minister Gideon Sa'ar referred to it in a different way. Because we are excommunicating hundreds of thousands of people who are brought to Israel on the basis of the law of return, there is a distinct danger that the Jewish people will become a minority in the land of Israel. And if we don't change our approach to the question of who is a Jew, the Jews will become a minority within a relatively short period of time. That is an existential threat. And that threat should be at the steps and on the floor, on the constant table of the Prime Minister of Israel. How to assure that the Jewish majority in Israel is preserved. And the only way is to change the approach to the question, who is a Jew? And we don't have the time to do that. That's number one. Number two, I would like to say that after the last operation in the south, the Prime Minister gave an interview to a newspaper called Israel Hayom, Israel Today. That's a newspaper which is controlled by the Prime Minister and he especially controls the headlines which appear there. And he said there that if the operation against Gaza had not lasted 50 days as it lasted, but 500 days, the result would have been the same, but the price we would have paid would be much higher. If after 500 days of combat, in the estimate of the Prime Minister, Hamas would have survived, this means to say that the policy on Hamas, the repeated rounds of confrontation over 30 years of existence, next year will be 30 years that Hamas is in existence, 5 confrontations, 2 intifadas, and then the operation in 2009, the 2012, 2014, this means to say that what we are doing is not achieving the purpose, and we should rethink what we're doing. How should we rethink? There are 2 ways of dealing with an enemy. One is to beat them, to hit them, to destroy them, to kill them. And there is a second way, to talk to them, because you want to influence their minds, because you want to show them that there is an alternative for them, not the alternative they wish. Because one other thing I want to make clear to you, and this is my final message to you, the leadership of the Hamas knows that they have no capability of destroying Israel.
Efraim.
And the leading, one more sentence, and prominent Americans in this country, people who have been in high office, have met the leadership of Hamas over the last few years, and they've heard such messages from them. So now is the time to talk to them. And I wouldn't be surprised if the person who is going to do it will be Avigdor Lieberman.
Interesting. Gabi, if I could just shift to you right away, your response to that. I mean, you fought with Hamas. You led the first big operation that Israel launched after the disengagement, 2008-9, Cass led. Should Israel be talking to Hamas?
So what is the question? Okay, let's. I would like to start with what Ambassador Dennis Ross said about the state of Israel, where he mentioned that he's optimistic about the relationship between us and the United States, mentioning all the things that Israel stands for and represent, the only democracy, freedom of rights, free election, whatever. I think, which is related to our issue in hand today, he forgot one important thing that we have that allowed to Israel to exist. And this is the IDF, a strong IDF, Israeli Defense Forces. And the intelligence community. Yes. Well, I think that we have to separate the issue regarding your question. We have to fight terror, and we must seek any opportunity while doing so to solve some of the conflicts around us. Regarding the Hamas, I don't think we can talk with Hamas. Hamas do not recognize Israel. For this aspect, any aspect, maybe differently to the West Bank, Hamas is an enemy state. And any enemy that we should treat as an enemy. It doesn't mean that we cannot ease the pressure on the population. And with the right security consideration, I think we have to assist them as far as we can. And that's what we are doing. But we cannot compromise with terror. And I think Israel have demonstrated again and again that we know how to fight terror. And the notion that terror is not invincible is not correct. We, I think, have shown to us, to our public, and to the world that we can fight terror.
So the world can learn from that? Well, how can that be applied?
Yeah. When I asked about ISIS, I think ISIS can be defeated and should be defeated. And I think in a case of ISIS, it's not a question of willfire. It's a question of will. It's not a question of whether we can do it. It's a question of whether we want to do it. I think ISIS, we understand regarding to what Anat, my colleague, said, we understand and identify the enemy. I think it's important. But like any other enemies, they are the bad guys. And at the end of the day, they are dying like anybody else.
Right.
And we have to fight them. And I don't think that there is a real serious efforts to fight ISIS. I think that there is other opportunities. And I think it's a mistake.
We have to say goodbye to Anat Berko. I apologize. She has a flight to catch.
I just want to say something if we compare between ISIS and Hamas. ISIS built on jihad tourism, as I called. Many jihad tourists, jihad extreme, thrill and adventures to rape and kill in the name of Allah. Hamas, the difference is that Hamas is sitting in Gaza Strip, and not just there, they are also in the West Bank, and even the Islamic movement inside Israel that identify with Hamas, even some Knesset members. But Hamas live with his own people. It's not that they are coming as a tourist to the place. So because of that, we can deter them in a better way. They have something to lose. And believe me, Efraim, from my experience with Hamas face-to-face so many years, and you read my book, I spoke with Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, the founder of the Hamas, very long conversation, and with the parliament members of Hamas. They don't want anything with us. It's a pragmatic organization, right? But if they'll stop to say that they want to if they'll stop to call for the destruction of the state of Israel, they will stop to be Hamas, and they know that. I apologize.
Thank you, Anat.
Thank you, and I need to write to them.
Very much. Malcolm, before I jump to you, Caroline, I'm sure you have what to respond to this discussion here about whether Israel should be engaging more with Hamas, not engaging, deterrence. What's the solution?
Solutions are hard to come by, but we have a lot of aides, a lot of people with good advice. First of all, talking to Hamas is not talking to Hamas. Talking to Hamas is talking to Iran. Hamas is not an independent operative, nor are any of the others. I think the key is, and I agree with Gabi, that first we got to demonstrate strength, because terrorists by their nature are cowards. They attack civilians, they attack buses, they attack women. They are cowards, and the thing they respect is strength. When they're confronted with strength, they back off. And part of the problem is that we have tolerated for too long. And as I think both would agree, we waited too long to respond. The international community I'm talking about, the United States, Europe, and others, we gave them a license to kill. We can go after the funding sources. None of them can exist without the oxygen. We can go after those who aid and abet them. And largely, this is Iran. If we deal with Iran, then we can deal with Hamas and Hezbollah and everything else. But if we don't deal with Iran, we allow them to get away with what they're getting away with, then we will continue to face the problem in increasing ways. We know ISIS moves into Syria now, trying to create, Al-Qaeda, to create its own little caliphate. We see ISIS in Lebanon. We see all of these things. We knew about the foreign fighters when there were hundreds, when there were thousands, and now there are tens of thousands, and we did not act. We could have stopped these things. Now, we can't deal with it. European countries can't deal with it. I meet with their security chiefs. They tell us that it takes 10 policemen to monitor each one. And France doesn't have 15,000 people to assign. Britain, France, half of their armies are being used for domestic security. So we are facing a worldwide plague, and only a concerted message. And when they believe the West does not have the will and determination, that's what Osama bin Laden said, Hania said it, all of them said it. The West lacks will and determination, and we do not show them. We have to win back our allies from Saudi Arabia to Morocco to Azerbaijan. They will be allies in this fight. They feel alienated from us now. We have to show them that we will lead a war against terrorism, and we can defeat it.
Caroline, you've written a lot about this issue that I think both Malcolm and Gabi are talking about where there's a lack of will. And you look around the world today and you see terror is unfortunately thriving in certain places. Europe, particularly. How do you understand that?
Well, I think that, with all due respect to Efraim Halevy, this is an existential threat, and the people who are threatening us the most are ourselves, because we can fight and we can defeat them, but we have made ourselves paralyzed. We've paralyzed ourselves by refusing to recognize the nature of the threat. Even when we talk about a war on terrorism, terrorism is a tactic. It's not a strategy. I mean, they're using it as a tool. It's not what defines them. What defines them is their view of Islam, as Hassan said, and we have to be willing to acknowledge that. We're not. We're not. You see in Europe, they refuse to acknowledge the truth, and they're killing themselves. I mean, their capital cities are becoming no-go zones for any woman, for any girl. You cannot survive this way, and they're not. Sweden is collapsing before our eyes. So we wouldn't say, there's no solution to this. First of all, let's diagnose the problem. It's extraordinary to me that 15 years after 9/11, the West is steeped in denial about something, even when hundreds of people are being massacred in their streets and in their theaters and in their cafes. This is a disaster. In Israel ourselves, we have a problem with our own denial mechanisms, because we also want to believe that it's about us, because then we can blame ourselves and we can get angry at one another and talk about this one being an enlightened person and this one being a dark person. And we're not looking at the people who are training their children, who are indoctrinating them and are giving them the weaponry to murder ours. And, if we are not willing to do this, we want to say it's about peace. I mean, really, you want to talk to Hamas? Are you kidding me? I mean, these people are not interested in talking to us. They're interested in annihilating us. So, to recap, can we win this war? Which war? Are we willing to describe it in terms that are real? Are we willing to acknowledge what it's about? That it's not about us. It's about them, and we have to be willing to acknowledge them on their own terms and deal with them as such, whether it's Iran behind them, Saudi Arabia, whether it's just people going to the mosque 5 times a day and believing what they believe. We have to simply allow people to speak for themselves instead of constantly reinterpreting what they say in order for us not to have to do anything about it. So I think, that the answer here is clear. You have to be willing to do something. And one final statement about what Netanyahu apparently said in this interview. I have to say something. We have a very limited time frame for attacking our enemies, because the West is really, in many ways, collaborating with them and saying that every step that Israel takes in its own defense is somehow or another, if we are successfully defending ourselves, then we must be committing a war crime, because we're not allowed to be successful. So, the thing is that if we have to move quickly, then we have to be willing to act premeditative. We have to be the preemptors. We have to be determining when we fight and not constantly reacting to barrages of missiles on our cities. That means that if we know that there are missiles in this town in Lebanon, if we know that they're headquartered in Shifa Hospital, then we have to go quickly, deal with it, and get out, because the Prime Minister is right. There are so many things we can't do, so we need that shock and awe at the very outset, I think, from a tactical perspective. So that's it.
I want to just shift gears for a moment at the time we have left. Gabi, you were the Chief of Staff in 2007 when Israel signed its last Memorandum of Understanding with the United States for $30 billion for 10 years, which is now expiring, and we're negotiating now a new, supposed to be a larger deal. Would you be concerned that having Avigdor Lieberman as defense minister would somehow impact those talks in a bad way?
Well, actually, it was in 2006 when I was the Undersecretary of the Department of Defense, and then the number, by the way, was 2.4. And we suggest to the administration to raise it up to $3 billion, which they did. I don't know exactly the number, what are the numbers today, but here's my understanding. I think the necessity of this foreign military aids is important to both sides, and I think it will go beyond personality and individual. And I think at the end of the day, we will reach an agreement, hopefully to do it with this administration, because it's going to end next year, beginning of next year. And I don't think that it will be, depend on the name of the Minister of
Did
Defense.
Netanyahu make a mistake?
And I think, by the way, I think that Mr. Lieberman, if I can say, have demonstrated when he was in the Foreign Office a pragmatic approach, definitely with the relationship with the United States, if you recall. So I think he understands the importance of this relationship. I think the relationship is deep-rooted in the both establishment, the defense establishment, and I will not be worried about this relationship, the nature, the depth, and the understanding. Plus, we're facing very similar challenges today, and while we are speaking among professionals from both sides, we are expanding our sharing of information, sharing of mutual program. So politics aside and the reality aside, I mean, there is a huge gap between the rhetoric and the reality. So I feel comfortable with that.
Efraim, as head of the Mossad, you had very strong relations with Jordan, if I recall correctly, and particularly with the previous king. You look at what's happening now in the region, Jordan with the influx of refugees, Israel very concerned because that's our longest border. The stability of the regime, what do you foresee happening there?
I know the King of Jordan, the present King of Jordan. I've known him since he was a teenager. I think he's a very capable leader of Jordan. I think he has handled the waves of refugees extremely well. I think he has shown capabilities of handling very, very delicate situations similar to the way his father did. And therefore, I'm optimistic that Jordan will be able to maintain its stability and also to play the key role it is playing in the region, and also, by the way, for the security of Israel. The peace treaty with Israel, between Israel and Jordan, is a strategic asset of Israel, and there should be no way of demeaning it in any way, in any form. But I want to say two other things very briefly. Hamas is no longer linked to Iran. Hamas is now adrift of Iran, and Hamas is now searching for ways and means of dialoguing with Israel. And when I say this out of knowledge, not out of surmise. If we wanted to finish off Hamas, we had three distinct possibilities and opportunities to do this. In 2009, and 2012, and 2014. And the Prime Minister of today was the Prime Minister in 2012 and 2014. And he is not a dove, and he's not a softie. But he didn't instruct the IDF to enter Gaza and to finish it off. And therefore, he probably had good reason for that. And to the best of my knowledge, the General Staff of the IDF did not recommend this as a method. And
well, we have the Chief of Staff right here. Was this recommended to completely destroy Hamas at any point? Efraim is saying that the IDF never officially recommended that we go in and completely take down Hamas.
During cast-led operation? During what operation?
Well, during any operation. He says 2009, 14, 2012.
Well, I think there is no doubt, should not be doubt, that if the IDF will be ordered tomorrow morning to take off the Hamas, and it would mean to enter Gaza and to capture, like a protective, like Chomat Magen, what we did in 2002.
Defensive shield.
Defensive shield. They can do it. I mean, we will have sacrifice, but we can do it. There is no question. Maybe we'll reach this point. I don't know. Definitely, we have to be ready for that. And in cast-led operation in 2009, we entered Gaza for 3 weeks, and we captured many of the leaders, and we cut the street for 2, and we almost were in the heart of Gaza, in the main street. Right. So it's doable, and I think we have to be ready. I don't think that it's to be correct to assume that we will never do it. probably they prevent from doing it. But I think that's the notion that the only option is to talk with them. I think it's wrong. We have lived in this region with constant fighting with our enemy, more than 3 or 4 or 5, until they reach the point that they will have to accept our existence in the region. Hamas are not there.
Yeah.
They have. Well, they have. I haven't heard it.
I just want to get...
They're sending rockets and digging tunnels.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. I just want to go back to Malcolm for 1 second. You've recently traveled the region, Egypt, Turkey. You've seen... What are you hearing about this realignment? There's a lot of talk of changes, realignment, a lot of talks of changes there, mutual interest, shared interest between Israel and these countries.
Well, there certainly are major changes taking place, and the recognition that Israel is not the source of instability, but stability. One Arab leader told me, Israel is our only hope against the enemy being Iran. And they say, we pray for them. We'll condemn them, but we pray for them. There is, across the region, the disappointment about the disengagement, the sense of disengagement of the West, policies, the lack of resolve, and they see that Israel's strength and the potential that Israel represents. I think the Mediterranean Initiative, which we are promoting and which really has immense potential. President Sisi said, when we raised it, he said, no, I'm not going to join, I'm in it. From Italy to Morocco to Cyprus, Greece, Malta, Bulgaria, all of them see the new opportunity with Israel as the hub. And they see it most of all as the bulwark against Iran. And frankly, if Iran has no relationship with Hamas today, why are they shipping weapons through the Sudan, through Eritrea, through Somalia, to the Sinai and to Gaza, as well as the weapons coming from Libya? So it is not that they don't, I'm not saying they control them completely. It is certainly, when you saw this past month, the leaders of Hamas met in Tehran with Suleiman and with other leaders in Tehran. So it is not a severed tie, but the influence that they hold over the region. And it is the key to solving the problems of the region. It is standing up to Iran, not asking banks and others to dollarize and to do deals with them, but to say to them, until you change, no deals, no money, no income.
Okay. We're going to hear from Caroline later. She'll have a speech, so I'll skip her one last time. But Gabi, I wouldn't do my job if I didn't ask you. Ya'alon has now stepped down from the Defense Ministry. Gideon Sa'ar is here at the conference. You're rumored to potentially one day be considering making a run in some political platform or another. Does this change any of your calculations? I have a lot of journalist friends, so I have to ask.
Yeah, you'll do your...
Yeah, it's
You'll do... Working? Yeah. You'll do your job, I'll do mine. I have great respect to Mr. Bogi Ya'alon for what he have done to this country and for long service, and I hope he will continue to contribute to secure the state of Israel. That's what I have to say, and I think we ought to thank him for what he did.
Well, we'll take this opportunity to thank you all very much. Thank you for this panel.